The first light of morning crept slowly across the rippling surface of the Pacific Ocean, casting pale gold reflections on waters that had witnessed countless centuries of quiet isolation, until the war shattered that silence forever. As the sun climbed higher, its rays revealed a chain of distant islands emerging like emerald stars from a sea of endless blue. At first glance, they looked peaceful, even beautiful. Palm trees swaying in a warm breeze, white beaches curving gently around shallow lagoons, volcanic hills rising dramatically behind dense jungles. But beneath this serene facade lay one of the most brutally contested battlegrounds of World War II. For the thousands of American Marines and soldiers packed tightly into landing craft, the scene ahead was anything but peaceful. Their boats rocked rhythmically with the swells, each movement reminding them of the uncertainty awaiting beyond the shoreline. The smell of fuel and salt air mixed with the metallic tang of tension. The men were drenched in sweat long before they touched sand, partly from the suffocating tropical heat, partly from the knowledge that the Japanese defenders watching from concealed positions had spent months preparing intricate kill zones. Every inch of land they were about to enter had been studied, fortified, and weaponized. High overhead, formations of American aircraft droned steadily forward, their engines echoing across the sky like an ominous warning. Some flew scouting routes over the islands, identifying artillery nests and camouflaged bunkers. Others carried bombs capable of shaking the earth itself, preparing the way for the amphibious assault forces below. Further out at sea, the thunder of naval guns roared at rhythmic intervals. Massive battleships and cruisers sending shells powerful enough to uproot entire trees or collapse cliffside tunnels. The bombardment lit the horizon in flashes of orange and white, each detonation sending shockwaves that trembled through the bodies of the waiting men. To an outsider, the Pacific Islands looked small and insignificant. Yet in 1942 and the years that followed, these fragments of land became among the most valuable military prizes on Earth. Their strategic importance could not be overstated. Whoever controlled these islands controlled air routes, supply chains, communication networks, and, ultimately, the fate of the Pacific War. The Japanese Empire understood this long before the Americans arrived. Using every natural advantage the islands offered, jungle canopy, volcanic rock, coral ridges, and mountainous terrain, the Japanese built webs of fortifications designed to resist even the most relentless assault. Caves became command posts, ravines became ambush corridors, and beaches became carefully measured shooting galleries. The soldiers inside the landing craft knew this. They had heard the stories. Entire squads wiped out before even reaching shore, machine guns hidden so expertly that tracer fire seemed to materialize from the jungle itself, bamboo spears placed beneath shallow water, and mines buried in the sand where incoming troops would instinctively seek cover. Many of the veterans in the boats had already fought in earlier campaigns, in the Solomons, on Guadalcanal, or around New Guinea, and they understood the deadly combination of harsh environment and determined enemy waiting for them. Around them, the sea was not empty. It was alive with the organized chaos of war. Long lines of transport ships, destroyers forming protective screens, carriers positioned far to the rear, their decks already being prepared for the next wave of aircraft. Small patrol boats zipped across the water, each carrying messages, medical personnel, ammunition, or orders. Smoke from naval gunfire drifted low across the ocean's surface, carried inland by the warm wind. Even the birds that circled overhead seemed to sense something unnatural, their silhouettes crossing shadowy waters stained with engine oil from the massive fleet. The air carried layers of sound. Distant explosions, shouted commands, the groan of heavy equipment being moved into position, and the constant splash of waves against metal hulls. The ocean itself felt like a character in this vast unfolding drama. Calm at the surface, but hiding treacherous reefs, deep currents, and sudden storms that could form without warning. Many Marines would later swear that the Pacific seemed determined to claim as many lives as the enemy. On the beaches of the islands, Japanese soldiers took their positions. Some tightened their grips on rifles, others settled into fortified pillboxes carved into the earth. In underground tunnels, officers reviewed maps illuminated by dim lanterns, planning how best to slow or stop the American advance. They knew reinforcements would not come. They knew retreat was forbidden. And they understood that the American strategy, later known as island hopping, was designed to isolate them, starve them of supplies, and render them unable to support neighboring positions. Yet the Japanese defenders still prepared to fight with a ferocity born of indoctrination, duty, and desperation. Back at sea, the American troops waited for the signal. Many of the younger soldiers, barely more than boys, tried to steady their breathing. Some touched photographs tucked into their uniform pockets, faces of loved ones waiting back home. Others whispered quiet prayers. A few stared blankly ahead, their minds trapped somewhere between fear and resignation. A sudden blast from a naval horn jerked them back to the present. Officers barked commands. Engines roared. Landing craft surged forward. The approach to the islands felt like entering a different world. The closer the boats came, the more the jungle revealed its true nature. Dark, tangled, almost impenetrable. Sunlight barely reached the forest floor, swallowed by layers of thick leaves and twisting vines. The trees were tall and densely packed, creating a green curtain that blocked visibility. Somewhere inside that labyrinth of vegetation, Japanese snipers waited silently, rifles trained on the incoming invaders. The heat intensified as the landing craft neared shore. The tropical air felt heavy, pressing down on the soldiers' shoulders like an invisible weight. Sweat dripped from their helmets, rolled down their backs, and pooled inside their boots. The humidity made every breath feel thick. Some men tried to fan themselves, but the air offered no relief. These islands were beautiful, yes, but they were also unforgiving. They were designed by nature to test endurance, patience, and survival. Officers shouted again, "Prepare to land!" And adrenaline surged through the troops. The ramps of the landing craft rattled, chains clanking loudly as they prepared to drop. The soldiers crouched low, rifles ready, hearts pounding. Some exchanged glances with the men beside them, each silently acknowledging the bond formed in the space between fear and duty. Above them, aircraft swooped lower, releasing bombs that sent plumes of smoke rising from the shoreline. The explosions shook the boats, sending water splashing across their decks. Shrapnel whistled through the air, some pieces falling dangerously close. The naval bombardment intensified, shells slamming into the coastline with deafening force. Entire sections of jungle erupted in fountains of dirt and fire. Yet even with all this destruction, the men knew the Japanese defenses would survive. They always did. As the boats closed the final distance, the terrain became clearer. Coral reefs lay hidden beneath the water, ready to trap or overturn landing craft. Jagged rocks jutted out from the surf. The beaches were not smooth stretches of sand. They were obstacles, trenches, fallen logs, metal spikes, and craters from previous bombardments. Behind these lay the first line of defensive positions: pillboxes, machine gun nests, mortars concealed beneath foliage, and fortified caves cut into the hillsides. The first landing craft reached shallow water. Marines jumped into the sea, rifles held high, the shock of warm salt water hitting their legs. Some stumbled on hidden rocks, others disappeared briefly beneath the waves before resurfacing with gasps for air. Ahead of them, the beach looked both impossibly far and hauntingly close. Then the Japanese opened fire. Machine gun bursts shredded the air, sending tracers slicing through the smoke. Mortar rounds exploded along the shoreline. The ocean around the soldiers churned with bullets, water erupting in fountains of white spray. Men dove behind whatever cover they could find: driftwood, rocks, even the bodies of fallen comrades. Officers shouted orders barely audible over the chaos. Medics rushed forward, dragging wounded men toward makeshift aid stations forming behind them. In that moment, the soldiers understood the true nature of the Pacific Island campaign, a brutal struggle where every yard of land came at a staggering cost. The serene tropical paradise they had seen at sunrise had transformed into a deadly labyrinth of fire and steel. Yet even amidst the carnage, the American troops pressed forward. They were part of something larger than themselves, a massive, coordinated campaign stretching across thousands of miles. Their objective was clear: seize the island, build an airfield, secure the supply lines, and prepare for the next target. This was the essence of island hopping, a strategy that would carry them through some of the most vicious battles of the war. As the smoke thickened and the jungle erupted with gunfire, one thing became certain: this campaign would test the limits of human endurance and redefine modern warfare. And for those who survived, the memories of the Pacific, the heat, the fear, the relentless nature of the enemy, would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The strategy of the Pacific Island campaign was deceptively simple in theory but devastatingly complex in execution. By late 1942, Allied commanders had realized that attempting to capture every Japanese-held island across the vast expanse of the Pacific would be both impractical and catastrophic in terms of casualties. The solution was a daring, calculated approach: island hopping, or leapfrogging over heavily fortified positions to strike only those islands critical for airfields, supply chains, and staging points toward Japan itself. Yet for the men on the ground, this strategy offered no safety, no pause for reflection, only the unyielding pressure of movement, combat, and survival. Operations began in the Solomon Islands, a sprawling, jagged chain of volcanic landforms shrouded in dense rainforest. The U.S. command meticulously mapped these islands, relying on intelligence reports from reconnaissance planes, submarines, and codebreakers who intercepted Japanese communications. Each island presented unique challenges: coral reefs cutting off landing zones, mangrove swamps masking hidden enemy positions, and mountains rising abruptly from the coast to form natural defensive bastions. Even before boots touched the sand, planners were calculating tidal patterns, weather forecasts, and the carrying capacity of every vessel. As the first amphibious assault waves departed for their targets, men and officers alike felt a profound sense of anticipation mingled with dread. The landing craft churned through swells that seemed endless, each rhythm of the oar and engine a reminder that there was no turning back. Commanders barked orders across the decks, coordinating multiple divisions spread across miles of ocean, while soldiers clutched rifles, bayonets fixed, hearts hammering against the chest plates of anticipation. Some glanced at the distant shore, its jagged silhouette dark against the morning haze, trying to memorize landmarks that might later save their lives. The approach to each island was as much a battle against nature as against the enemy. Coral reefs, often hidden just below the surface, threatened to strand landing craft, forcing men to wade hundreds of meters under fire. In some cases, the waves themselves seemed to conspire against the attackers, rising and crashing with sudden ferocity, swamping small boats and dragging men into deep water. Supplies were constantly at risk. Ammunition boxes, ration packs, and medical kits could be lost in seconds, leaving soldiers with only what they carried. The Japanese defenders were already in place, having spent months, or even years, preparing the islands for this moment. Engineers carved intricate tunnel networks into volcanic rock, creating interlinked bunkers that could withstand heavy artillery and aerial bombardment. Trenches zigzagged across ridges, with cleverly hidden firing positions allowing a single gunner to sweep entire sections of beach. Hidden mines, sharpened stakes, and tripwires were placed along every conceivable approach. Snipers positioned high in trees or in concealed caves could pick off anyone who exposed themselves. For the Marines, the enemy was invisible until it struck, and even then, it was often too late to react. The first assaults often began with naval bombardments designed to soften enemy positions, but even the most intense shelling could not destroy the natural camouflage or the ingenuity of Japanese defenses. On some islands, the bombers and battleships did immense damage to the jungle canopy but left command posts, supply caches, and secondary defensive lines intact. The men advancing from the landing craft soon realized that each step forward would be met with resistance. As they waded onto the beaches, gunfire erupted from pillboxes and tunnels hidden behind the foliage. Mortar rounds exploded in the sand around them, and machine guns raked the beach in calculated sweeps. In the chaos of the landing, soldiers quickly learned the importance of teamwork. Small squads formed tight formations, moving methodically behind whatever cover they could find. Driftwood, dunes, the bodies of fallen comrades, even shallow craters made by artillery. Officers shouted orders over the din, coordinating attacks, directing medics to the wounded, and maintaining whatever semblance of structure was possible amidst the cacophony. Communications were fragile, often broken by smoke, noise, and distance. Messengers sprinted across fire-swept beaches carrying critical instructions, fully aware that each step could be their last. Once the initial beachhead was secured, the battle moved inland, and the jungle revealed its full hostility. Dense undergrowth slowed progress to a crawl, forcing soldiers to hack through vines and branches with machetes while avoiding hidden traps. The air was thick and heavy, the humidity oppressive, and the smell of wet earth mixed with gunpowder and burning vegetation. Visibility was limited to a few meters in many areas, and the terrain favored defenders, who had long since learned to move silently and strike without warning. Troop movements had to be meticulously coordinated to prevent units from becoming isolated. Engineers worked tirelessly, constructing makeshift roads, clearing obstacles, and setting up communication lines. Artillery units established firing positions in the interior, relying on scouts to direct them toward enemy positions. Meanwhile, medics and support personnel dealt with the unrelenting human toll: heat exhaustion, tropical diseases, and the psychological strain of constant combat. Malaria, dysentery, and fungal infections claimed more lives than enemy bullets on some islands. Soldiers adapted to the environment as best they could, learning to ration water, improvise shelter, and maintain hygiene in impossible conditions. One key aspect of the early campaign was the combination of amphibious, aerial, and naval coordination. Carrier-based aircraft patrolled the skies, providing reconnaissance, strafing enemy positions, and dropping bombs on suspected strongholds. Destroyers and cruisers moved along the coast, delivering artillery support while avoiding hidden reefs and mines. Submarines prowled the surrounding waters, intercepting Japanese supply lines and gathering intelligence. Every successful landing depended on perfect synchronization between these forces, but perfection was elusive, and mistakes often resulted in catastrophic casualties. The psychological pressure on soldiers was immense. Each night, the sound of enemy artillery and sporadic gunfire echoed through the jungle. Sleep was nearly impossible. Rest periods were brief, and every soldier remained alert, knowing that a sudden attack could erupt at any moment. Letters from home, though treasured, were rare, and morale relied heavily on camaraderie, leadership, and sheer determination. The men understood that their success in this campaign was not only measured by territory gained but by survival against overwhelming odds. The Japanese defenders, for their part, fought with unwavering resolve. Officers instilled in their troops a belief in the necessity of sacrifice, emphasizing that every day of resistance bought time for other positions in the Pacific. Banzai charges, ambushes, and guerrilla tactics were employed with terrifying effectiveness. Even when supplies ran low or defensive positions were destroyed, the defenders adapted, retreating into secondary lines, caves, and hidden tunnels. For the Americans, the island-hopping strategy often meant bypassing some islands entirely, leaving entrenched enemies to be isolated, starved, and contained, a tactic as much psychological as tactical. As the campaign progressed, the Allies refined their approach. Intelligence teams studied terrain maps, aerial photographs, and captured documents to identify weak points in Japanese defenses. Specialized units were trained to navigate coral reefs, scale cliffs, and clear bunkers using flamethrowers, explosives, and close combat techniques. The lessons learned on early islands were applied rigorously on subsequent operations, but each new location brought its own challenges: different climates, unfamiliar vegetation, and uniquely adapted enemy strategies. Civilians, though largely removed from the front lines, were profoundly affected. Many had fled inland or to neighboring islands, leaving their homes and livelihoods behind. Those who remained were forced into hiding or coerced into assisting Japanese forces. Food shortages, disease, and fear of reprisal created an environment of near-constant terror. Soldiers often encountered villages abandoned in haste, the remnants of lives torn apart by the war. In some cases, civilians became unintentional guides through the jungles, providing intelligence about hidden traps or enemy movements. Yet their own survival was always precarious. The early months of the Pacific Island Campaign established a pattern that would repeat across hundreds of islands. Assault waves followed meticulous planning: bombardment from sea and air, landing in surf-laden beaches, initial clashes with entrenched defenders, movement through hostile jungle, and securing of strategic points such as airfields, ports, or communication centers. Casualties mounted with each operation, yet with each victory, the Allies gained not only territory but experience, morale, and the critical infrastructure necessary to continue the march toward Japan. Every island became a microcosm of the larger war, human ingenuity and courage pitted against determination and resilience, the unforgiving environment adding its own layer of challenge. Troops learned to adapt quickly, developing new tactics for jungle warfare, amphibious assaults, and coordination across multiple branches of the military. Yet the campaign was not just a test of strategy. It was a test of endurance, character, and survival under conditions that defied imagination. Through these opening stages, the Pacific Island Campaign demonstrated the complexity of modern warfare. It was not enough to have superior numbers or firepower. Success required precise coordination, adaptability, and the ability to operate in one of the harshest theaters on Earth. Every soldier, every landing craft, every bomb dropped, and every decision made contributed to the unfolding narrative of a campaign that would shape the outcome of the Pacific War, and ultimately, World War II itself. The main battles of the Pacific Island campaign were marked by intensity, unpredictability, and an almost mythic level of human endurance. Each island presented a unique theater of conflict, where the interplay between land, sea, and air created situations unlike any conventional battlefield. These engagements were not merely fights for territory, they were crucibles in which strategy, courage, and sheer survival instincts were tested to the extreme. Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu, and Iwo Jima emerged as emblematic symbols of the ferocity and complexity of island warfare, representing both the tactical brilliance and human cost inherent in the campaign. The Battle of Tarawa in November 1943 was one of the first amphibious assaults to truly expose the challenges of island combat. The island itself, barely 3 square miles of coral and sand, was fortified to perfection by the Japanese. Pillboxes lined the beaches, interconnected by trenches and hidden paths, with machine guns placed to cover every likely landing route. Coral reefs extended hundreds of meters offshore, a natural trap that caused the landing craft to ground, forcing Marines to wade through chest-deep water under an unrelenting hail of bullets. For many, the distance from the waterline to the beach seemed to stretch endlessly, each step a confrontation with the inevitability of mortality. Naval bombardment had softened some defenses, but the Japanese had reinforced structures to withstand heavy artillery. Every wave of soldiers met with concentrated fire, creating a living nightmare of explosions, smoke, and screaming voices. The chaos on Tarawa illustrated a grim truth of the Pacific Campaign. Technology and planning could mitigate risks, but they could never eliminate them. Engineers and officers coordinated landing schedules with artillery barrages and air support, but even the most meticulous planning faltered against the unpredictable variables of tide, weather, and human resistance. When the first units reached the beach, they encountered not only enemy fire but the terrain itself. Jagged coral tore boots and flesh alike, while submerged obstacles slowed movement and left soldiers exposed. Despite the horrific casualties, Marines pressed forward, climbing over obstacles, neutralizing bunkers with grenades and flamethrowers, and slowly advancing toward the island's interior. By the end of the battle, nearly 1,000 U.S. soldiers had fallen, but the island was secured, establishing a critical foothold for future operations. Saipan, captured in June 1944, offered an entirely different set of challenges. Larger than Tarawa and featuring a mountainous interior, Saipan became a deadly combination of urban combat, jungle warfare, and psychological warfare. The Japanese defenders, understanding the island's strategic importance, implemented a series of intricate defensive lines. Machine gun nests covered roadways and bridges, while tunnels within volcanic rock allowed troops to appear suddenly in the rear of advancing units. Civilians, caught between the two sides, suffered immensely. Many fled into caves or dense jungle, only to be caught in crossfire or driven to despair by hunger and disease. The battle on Saipan highlighted the psychological dimension of island combat. Japanese soldiers, indoctrinated to view surrender as dishonor, often chose death over capture, resulting in mass banzai charges, suicidal attacks designed to inflict maximum damage and delay Allied progress. One charge alone could sweep away dozens of attackers, leaving survivors traumatized by the sheer ferocity of their opponents. Peleliu, invaded in September 1944, was arguably one of the most grueling examples of jungle warfare. The island's tropical heat, exceeding 45 degrees Celsius (113 degrees Fahrenheit), combined with the dense undergrowth and rocky ridges, created an environment where soldiers faced as many threats from nature as from the enemy. Japanese troops had constructed a sophisticated network of caves and tunnels, some extending for miles, from which they could ambush advancing forces, fire artillery, or retreat to secondary positions without detection. Every advance required careful reconnaissance, coordination of fire support, and slow, deliberate movement through the terrain. Many soldiers collapsed from heat exhaustion, dehydration, or disease before even engaging with the enemy. Flamethrowers, demolition charges, and hand-to-hand combat became essential tools in navigating the labyrinthine battlefield. Despite heavy bombardment and continuous assaults, the Japanese defenders fought relentlessly, inflicting severe casualties before finally being overcome. Iwo Jima, perhaps the most iconic and brutal of the Pacific battles, embodied the culmination of island warfare's extreme challenges. The volcanic island's black sand, uneven terrain, and Mount Suribachi itself became defining elements of the struggle. Japanese forces utilized every inch of the island, creating interlocking defensive positions connected through miles of underground tunnels. Artillery positions could be moved without detection, and hidden snipers made any movement across the island a perilous endeavor. Marines landing on Iwo Jima faced waves of intense resistance, suffering casualties at nearly every stage of their advance. Each building, ridge, and bunker became a miniature battlefield, requiring careful planning, courage, and adaptation to the ever-changing dynamics of combat. The battle lasted over a month, leaving thousands dead or wounded and solidifying Iwo Jima as a symbol of both sacrifice and tactical brilliance. Naval and air operations were inseparable from these ground engagements. Aircraft carriers provided constant air cover, bombing entrenched positions, strafing enemy troops, and supporting amphibious landings. Destroyers and battleships circled the islands, delivering artillery barrages to soften defenses, while simultaneously defending against potential counterattacks from Japanese vessels. Coordination between land, sea, and air forces was essential. Misalignment could result in friendly fire incidents or missed opportunities to neutralize enemy positions. The logistical challenges were staggering. Supply lines stretched across thousands of miles of ocean, requiring precise timing for ammunition, rations, and medical evacuation. Any disruption could jeopardize the entire operation, underscoring the precarious balance of planning and execution. Combat on these islands was relentless and intimate. Unlike large-scale open-field engagements in Europe, the Pacific battles were fought in close quarters, where visibility was limited, terrain was unforgiving, and the enemy could strike from hidden positions. Small squads engaged in house-to-house fighting, clearing bunkers room by room, and moving through dense jungle with only instinct, training, and courage to guide them. Communication lines were fragile. Messages often had to be delivered by runners exposed to enemy fire. Medics risked their lives to reach the wounded, improvising care under conditions that would overwhelm even the most seasoned practitioners. The psychological toll was immense. Soldiers confronted death constantly, witnessed the loss of comrades, and endured an environment that amplified exhaustion, fear, and the sense of isolation. The interplay between strategy and improvisation became evident as the campaign progressed. Commanders adjusted tactics based on terrain and enemy behavior, deploying specialized units trained for jungle warfare, demolitions, or amphibious assault. Flamethrowers and explosives were used to clear fortified bunkers. Snipers and scouts were sent ahead to identify hidden threats. Engineers built bridges, roads, and observation posts under fire. Each island required a customized approach, and mistakes were costly. The Japanese, though often outnumbered and outgunned, leveraged their intimate knowledge of the terrain and tactical ingenuity to inflict maximum casualties while slowing Allied advances. The human stories that emerged from these battles highlighted both the horrors and heroism of the Pacific Island campaign. Soldiers endured weeks without proper sleep, subsisting on limited rations, and navigating terrain that drained both body and spirit. Acts of bravery were frequent. Medics pulling comrades from exposed positions, squads mounting counterattacks under heavy fire, and individuals risking their lives to neutralize machine gun nests or clear booby traps. Correspondingly, many soldiers suffered profoundly from the psychological impact, experiencing trauma that would affect them long after the war's end. The intensity of combat, combined with environmental hardships and the constant presence of death, created conditions that few could imagine from a safe distance. The main battles of the Pacific Island campaign also underscored the importance of coordination and timing. Successful operations required precise alignment of naval bombardments, aerial assaults, and infantry movements. Landing craft had to reach shore at exact times. Artillery units needed to suppress enemy positions without endangering advancing troops. Supply lines had to remain uninterrupted across vast stretches of ocean. The cumulative effect of these coordinated actions often determined whether a battle ended swiftly or descended into weeks of grueling combat. Failures in timing or communication could result in devastating casualties, underscoring the razor's edge on which the campaign unfolded. Ultimately, the key conflicts of the Pacific Island campaign were defined by their combination of intensity, complexity, and human cost. Each island, each ridge, each fortified position became a stage for testing strategy, courage, and survival. While the Americans gained ground steadily, each advance demanded meticulous planning, adaptability, and extraordinary resilience from the troops involved. The campaign was not just about winning territory. It was about mastering an environment that was as deadly as the enemy, coordinating a multi-branch war effort over thousands of miles, and confronting the limits of human endurance in the face of relentless opposition. The legacy of these battles would resonate long after the islands were secured. Maps would bear the scars of artillery craters, forests would regrow over hidden tunnels, and the stories of heroism, loss, and resilience would be etched into the memory of those who survived. For the Allies, each victory represented not just a captured island, but a critical step toward the eventual defeat of Japan. For the Japanese, each stand symbolized unwavering resolve and the tragic cost of a strategy that demanded absolute loyalty. And for the soldiers, medics, engineers, and sailors who endured it, the main battles of the Pacific Island Campaign became the defining experiences of their lives, shaping their understanding of courage, sacrifice, and the harsh realities of war. The Pacific Island Campaign, after years of relentless fighting, staggering loss, and strategic maneuvering, culminated in outcomes that would shape the final phase of World War II in the Pacific. Unlike a single battle with a clearly defined moment of victory, the campaign's resolution was gradual, cumulative, and defined as much by the absence of opposition as by the islands that were captured. Each victory on Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu, and Iwo Jima represented not just a conquered territory but a critical node in a vast, interconnected network that brought the Allies closer to Japan. The outcomes of these battles, both tangible and intangible, would have lasting implications for military strategy, human experience, and the course of the war itself. From a strategic perspective, the campaign's most significant outcome was the establishment of a series of forward bases that enabled the Allies to project power deeper into Japanese-held territory. Airfields captured and constructed on islands like Saipan and Guam allowed long-range bombers to reach the Japanese home islands, providing an unprecedented ability to conduct sustained aerial campaigns. Naval facilities permitted the repair, resupply, and staging of fleets, ensuring that supply lines remained robust and capable of supporting further amphibious assaults. These strategic gains were not mere conveniences. They were essential to the overarching objective of the Pacific Theater: to isolate Japan, disrupt supply and communication networks, and prepare the ground for potential invasion if necessary. The toll of the campaign, however, was immense. Casualties on both sides were staggering, reflecting the intensity and unforgiving nature of island warfare. Tarawa alone saw over 1,000 American deaths within a mere 76 hours of combat, with many more wounded. Saipan, Peleliu, and Iwo Jima each claimed thousands more, as soldiers faced not only determined enemy resistance but also oppressive environmental conditions. Heat, disease, and dehydration were constant companions, compounding the effects of gunfire, artillery, and hand-to-hand combat. On the Japanese side, the combination of entrenched positions, refusal to surrender, and banzai charges resulted in near-total destruction of defending forces on many islands. Entire battalions were wiped out, leaving very few survivors to tell the story. In some cases, Japanese troops chose death over capture, often in mass suicides that underscored both their indoctrination and the extremity of their predicament. For the Allies, the human cost was not only physical but psychological. Soldiers, medics, and engineers who survived the landings carried the trauma of what they had witnessed and endured. Sleep deprivation, constant threat of ambush, and exposure to death and injury on an almost continuous basis shaped the mental landscape of the campaign. Letters home and journal entries from the front often described a mixture of exhaustion, determination, fear, and numbness. Medics recounted the overwhelming task of treating the wounded under fire, improvising care in open sand, jungles, and makeshift field hospitals. Officers struggled to maintain morale while facing the reality that the next island assault could be even bloodier than the last. Yet, despite the staggering hardships, the sense of purpose and shared sacrifice bonded units together in ways that would define the Marines, soldiers, and sailors who participated. Logistically, the outcomes were transformative. The Allies developed and refined complex supply and support networks capable of sustaining large-scale amphibious operations across thousands of miles of open ocean. Ships, aircraft, and transport vehicles were coordinated with extraordinary precision to ensure the flow of food, ammunition, medical supplies, and reinforcements. Engineers developed innovative techniques for constructing airfields in coral, volcanic ash, and dense jungle soil. Field hospitals were rapidly established on newly captured islands, providing care under conditions that would have overwhelmed conventional facilities. These logistical achievements not only enabled victories in the Pacific but also set new standards for military operations, influencing post-war military planning and doctrine. On a tactical level, the campaign yielded important lessons that would influence subsequent operations. Island hopping demonstrated that bypassing heavily fortified positions could conserve resources and reduce casualties if executed with precision. The importance of combined arms operations, integrating naval bombardment, air support, and infantry assaults, became clear, with coordination often making the difference between success and catastrophic failure. The use of specialized equipment, such as flamethrowers, explosives, and amphibious vehicles, proved essential in overcoming entrenched defenses. Reconnaissance, intelligence, and adaptability emerged as decisive factors, as commanders who could anticipate enemy movements, exploit terrain advantages, and adjust plans in real time achieved far better outcomes than those relying solely on brute force. Despite the tactical and strategic successes, the outcomes of the campaign also exposed significant challenges. High casualty rates forced continuous replenishment of personnel, straining recruitment and training systems. The psychological toll led to lasting trauma among veterans, many of whom struggled with post-traumatic stress in the years after the war. Logistical operations, though successful, required enormous resources and careful planning, highlighting the vulnerability of supply chains over vast distances. These lessons, however harsh, were absorbed by Allied command and shaped the planning of subsequent operations, including the final assaults on Okinawa and ultimately the considerations surrounding the invasion of the Japanese home islands. The campaign's conclusion was not marked by a single, definitive surrender, but by a series of cumulative collapses of Japanese defensive positions. Islands once considered impregnable fell after days or weeks of intense fighting. Surviving defenders, cut off from resupply and reinforcements, either perished in combat or retreated into isolation, their ability to influence the broader war effort nullified. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. For the Allies, the steady accumulation of victories reinforced morale and confidence. For the Japanese, the loss of strategic islands signaled the encroaching inevitability of defeat. Civilians, who had endured terror, deprivation, and displacement, emerged from hiding to confront the transformed landscape, destroyed villages, scorched jungles, and the lingering presence of death in every corner. The resolution of the campaign also had far-reaching political and diplomatic consequences. Securing the islands provided the Allies with staging points for further operations, enabling them to press the war closer to the Japanese mainland. Control over airfields allowed bombing campaigns to escalate, directly targeting industrial capacity and transportation networks within Japan. Naval dominance, achieved through the capture of strategically positioned islands, restricted Japanese movement and forced the Imperial Navy to remain largely defensive. In essence, each captured island was a linchpin in a strategy designed to isolate Japan, weaken its ability to sustain the war, and prepare for the ultimate confrontation that would determine the outcome of the Pacific theater. From a human perspective, the aftermath of these battles was a mixture of relief, mourning, and reflection. Soldiers who survived the landing and jungle fighting often described a surreal juxtaposition. The tropical beauty of the islands contrasted with the stark devastation of war. Beaches were littered with the remnants of combat, destroyed vehicles, spent ammunition, craters, and the fallen. Jungle paths bore evidence of ambushes, defensive positions, and hasty retreats. The scale of destruction underscored the intensity of the struggle and the enormous sacrifices required to secure even small patches of land. Memorials and cemeteries would later be established, honoring those who had given their lives in what many historians consider among the most difficult and costly campaigns of World War II. In broader historical context, the resolution of the Pacific Island Campaign demonstrated the effectiveness and limits of amphibious warfare. It confirmed the necessity of meticulous planning, combined arms coordination, and adaptability to local conditions. It highlighted the importance of logistics, intelligence, and specialized training. Most importantly, it illustrated the profound human cost of such operations. The lives lost, the injuries sustained, and the psychological scars carried by soldiers, sailors, and medics alike. Yet, it also exemplified extraordinary resilience, courage, and the capacity of human beings to endure unimaginable hardship in pursuit of a strategic goal. By mid-1945, the Allied position in the Pacific was overwhelmingly dominant. The capture of Okinawa, the isolation of remaining Japanese forces, and the establishment of airfields within striking distance of Japan created conditions that would ultimately lead to the end of the war. The Pacific Island Campaign, though composed of a series of individual battles, achieved its strategic objectives. It weakened the enemy, strengthened Allied control over key territories, and set the stage for the final operations that would bring World War II in the Pacific to a close. Its resolution was not a single moment of victory but a cumulative triumph, earned through sacrifice, endurance, and unwavering determination. Amid the grand strategy, sweeping maneuvers, and tactical calculations of the Pacific Island campaign, it was the personal stories of those who lived, fought, and endured that provide the deepest understanding of what the war truly demanded. The campaigns on Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu, and Iwo Jima were not just abstract military operations. They were intimate human dramas, defined by fear, courage, ingenuity, despair, and resilience. These individual accounts reveal the immense psychological and physical challenges faced by soldiers, sailors, medics, and even civilians caught in the maelstrom of war. Private Thomas Hale, a young Marine from Ohio, landed on Tarawa in November 1943. In his diary, he described the approach to the beach as like floating toward a storm where every drop of water hides death. His first steps into the coral-strewn surf were immediately met with machine gun fire. Hale wrote of friends falling beside him, of bullets slicing through the water and the air, and of his own terror at the thought that each step could be his last. Yet, amidst the fear, there was a strange clarity, a focus born of necessity. I moved because I had to, not because I wanted to. There was no other choice, he recorded. Hale survived, though the experience left him haunted for the rest of his life, his memoirs later recounting the delicate balance between instinct, training, and sheer luck that had kept him alive. Corporal Hiroshi Sato, a Japanese defender on Iwo Jima, provides a starkly different perspective. Entrenched in tunnels carved into volcanic rock, he spent weeks under constant bombardment, surviving on rainwater and what little food remained. In later interviews, Sato recalled the psychological toll of being cut off from reinforcements and watching comrades fall to American fire. "We were taught to fight to the last man," he said. "Every day we knew death could come silently, without warning. Yet we continued, because there was no other path, no other honor." Sato survived, later reflecting on the complex mix of duty, fear, and pride that had defined his actions. His story illuminates the experiences of countless Japanese soldiers, whose resilience and indoctrination created formidable obstacles for Allied forces. Medics also bore witness to the human cost of the campaign in ways that soldiers and officers could not fully comprehend. Ellen Warren, a Navy corpswoman aboard a hospital ship off the coast of Peleliu, recalled tending to the injured under impossible conditions. The wounded arrived in waves, their injuries ranging from gunshot and shrapnel wounds to burns and heat stroke. Warren wrote of men screaming in pain, of the frantic rush to apply tourniquets, dress wounds, and stabilize those who might otherwise be lost. She recounted one young Marine whose leg had been shattered by a mortar round, the boy's eyes wide with shock and fear. Warren described how, despite exhaustion and limited supplies, she and her fellow medics persevered, driven by the knowledge that each life saved was a victory against the horrors of the battlefield. Among the most harrowing stories were those of small units operating deep within hostile territory. A squad of Marines on Saipan, isolated from the main force, spent 3 days navigating through dense jungle under constant threat of sniper fire and ambush. They subsisted on limited rations, using leaves and rainwater to supplement their meager supplies. One soldier, Private First Class James Callahan, wrote in his journal of hearing the constant thrum of distant artillery, punctuated by the sudden crack of rifle fire close at hand. "We never knew where the next shot would come from," he recorded. "Every step could be our last. Every sound could be the beginning of something that ends us." The squad eventually reunited with their regiment, but the experience left a lasting imprint on each man, shaping their perceptions of fear, camaraderie, and survival. Civilian experiences also formed an integral part of the campaign's human narrative. On Saipan, thousands of civilians were trapped between the advancing American forces and the Japanese defenders. Some fled into caves or dense jungle to escape the bombardment, while others were coerced or persuaded to assist Japanese troops. Accounts from survivors describe starvation, dehydration, and constant fear of death. One woman, Mrs. Aiko Nakamura, recounted hiding with her children in a narrow cave while American artillery pounded the island above them. She described the uncertainty, the unending noise, and the constant calculation required to avoid detection or injury. "We lived day by day, hour by hour, praying for a moment of silence," she recalled. These personal experiences highlight the profound impact of the campaign not only on soldiers but on those whose lives were irrevocably altered by proximity to combat. Acts of extraordinary courage and ingenuity were common. Sergeant Michael Thompson, landing on Peleliu, described improvising a path through a maze of booby traps to rescue a wounded comrade. Using a combination of sandbags, sticks, and hand signals, he maneuvered under fire, ultimately reaching the injured Marine and dragging him to relative safety. Thompson's account illustrates the blend of quick thinking, bravery, and determination that characterized many personal stories from the campaign. It also highlights the necessity of adaptability. Standard tactics often failed in the unpredictable environment of the islands, requiring soldiers to innovate in real time. The psychological effects of constant combat cannot be overstated. Many soldiers reported experiencing what is now recognized as post-traumatic stress, long after leaving the islands. Dreams, flashbacks, and anxiety were frequent companions, with memories of fallen comrades, ambushes, and the pervasive presence of death replaying in vivid detail. Private Hale, for instance, described waking in the middle of the night with the sound of imaginary gunfire echoing in his ears, the sensation of salt water and coral beneath his feet. These accounts provide insight into the unseen, lingering impact of the campaign, underscoring that victory came at a profound personal cost. Some stories also reveal the moments of humanity and compassion that emerged amidst chaos. A Japanese soldier, separated from his unit on Iwo Jima, provided water to a wounded American scout he encountered in the tunnels. The act, though brief, illustrates the complex interplay of survival, morality, and shared humanity even in the most brutal contexts. Similarly, medics like Ellen Warren often formed deep, lasting bonds with soldiers whose lives they saved, witnessing firsthand both the fragility and resilience of the human spirit. The campaign also brought unexpected challenges in maintaining morale and cohesion. Letters from home were treasured but infrequent, rationed across the vast distances of the Pacific. Soldiers found comfort in small routines, shared humor, and the solidarity of their units. One platoon, stationed on Paliliu, created a makeshift chapel in the jungle using salvaged materials, allowing men a space for prayer, reflection, or simply a brief respite from the relentless intensity of combat. These small acts of resilience provided essential psychological support, sustaining individuals and units alike through the grueling months of engagement. In addition to courage and survival, the campaign revealed profound acts of sacrifice. Many soldiers knowingly risked, or willingly gave, their lives to save comrades, advance strategic objectives, or protect civilians. Such acts were often understated in official reports but became legendary in personal accounts and letters. Private Callahan, reflecting on the actions of a fellow Marine, described a man who shielded 3 wounded soldiers from a grenade blast, sacrificing himself instantly. "He didn't hesitate," Callahan wrote. "He just did what needed to be done. That's what kept us going." These narratives, repeated countless times across the islands, formed the moral backbone of the campaign's human story. Civilian stories often mirrored the intensity and moral complexity of soldier experiences. Families hiding in caves, communities forced to assist occupying forces, and individuals navigating the dangerous terrain between survival and morality provide insight into how ordinary people experienced extraordinary circumstances. Mrs. Nakamura's account of securing food and water for her children under fire demonstrates the daily, life-and-death decisions civilians faced. Similarly, diaries from other islands reveal civilians who acted as guides, mediators, or improvised medics, navigating a landscape where every action could result in life or death. The cumulative effect of these personal stories is staggering. Across the Pacific, tens of thousands of individuals, soldiers, sailors, medics, and civilians, endured conditions that tested every limit of human endurance. They confronted relentless heat, disease, dehydration, enemy fire, and psychological strain, yet continued to fight, survive, and adapt. Their experiences illuminate the realities of the Pacific Island Campaign in ways that strategy, maps, and statistics alone cannot. Through these individual accounts, the vast, impersonal sweep of war becomes human, tangible, and deeply moving. Ultimately, the personal narratives from the campaign underscore both the tragedy and heroism inherent in the Pacific theater. They reveal the interplay between courage, fear, endurance, and ingenuity, providing a human lens through which to understand one of the most complex and devastating campaigns of World War II. These stories, of survival, sacrifice, ingenuity, and resilience, form the living memory of the Pacific Island Campaign, ensuring that the experiences of those who lived through it remain vivid, instructive, and profoundly human. The Pacific Island Campaign was not only a series of bloody engagements but also a theater of innovation, adaptation, and unforeseen historical significance. Beyond the intense combat and personal stories, the campaign produced numerous tactical innovations, logistical feats, and strategic insights that would influence military doctrine for decades. These details, often overshadowed by dramatic narratives of battle, reveal the broader scope of what was involved in securing victory across thousands of miles of ocean and countless scattered islands. One of the most remarkable aspects of the campaign was the development and refinement of amphibious assault techniques. Prior to the Pacific Theater, amphibious warfare on such a scale had rarely been attempted. Early operations, such as those on Guadalcanal and Tarawa, exposed severe deficiencies in landing craft design, coordination, and planning. Many boats grounded on reefs or capsized in the surf, while troops waded long distances under fire. These setbacks prompted rapid innovation. New amphibious vehicles like the Landing Vehicle Tracked (LVT) were deployed, capable of traversing reefs and shallow waters. Engineers developed methods for clearing obstacles under fire, using demolition charges and flamethrowers to neutralize fortified positions. Coordinated landings became an intricate dance of timing and precision, blending naval bombardments, air support, and infantry movements to maximize effectiveness and minimize casualties. Naval innovation was equally impressive. The Pacific Theater saw the largest concentration of aircraft carriers in history, and their integration with battleships, cruisers, and destroyers represented a new paradigm in naval warfare. Ships were equipped with radar, improved fire control systems, and more effective anti-aircraft defenses, allowing fleets to operate across vast distances while maintaining security and coordination. Submarines, too, played a vital role, disrupting Japanese supply lines and gathering intelligence. The ability to maintain logistical support across thousands of miles of ocean, in an era without modern satellite communication, was a feat of remarkable planning and execution. Air power, particularly carrier-based aviation, was critical in shaping outcomes before and during landings. Tactical bombing and strafing missions suppressed enemy positions, allowing ground forces to advance with reduced resistance. Reconnaissance planes provided invaluable intelligence, mapping fortifications, tracking troop movements, and identifying hidden obstacles. The synergy between air, sea, and ground forces became a hallmark of the Pacific Campaign, demonstrating the strategic value of integrated operations. These lessons would influence military planners for decades, establishing principles still studied in modern combined arms doctrine. The islands themselves offered both unique advantages and challenges, which directly impacted tactics and strategy. Coral atolls, like those of Tarawa, created natural barriers that slowed landings and forced soldiers to wade through open water under fire. Volcanic islands, such as Iwo Jima and Saipan, provided hard, defensible terrain that the Japanese fortified with tunnels, caves, and pillboxes. Dense jungles and swamps slowed movement, masked enemy positions, and created harrowing conditions for troops. Engineers and planners learned to adapt rapidly, employing explosives to clear obstacles, constructing improvised roads and bridges, and using local materials to fortify positions. These adaptations were critical to success and reflected an unprecedented level of problem-solving under extreme conditions. One intriguing detail of the campaign was the use of cave and tunnel networks by Japanese defenders. These subterranean structures were not mere shelters. They were complex defensive systems designed to withstand heavy bombardment and allow soldiers to strike unexpectedly from concealed positions. Some tunnels extended for miles, with interconnected chambers for command, storage, and living quarters. Japanese engineers designed ventilation shafts, hidden entrances, and internal corridors that enabled rapid redeployment during attacks. American forces responded with innovative tactics. Flamethrowers, explosives, and even specialized tunnel rats were employed to clear these networks. These subterranean battles added a new dimension to warfare, combining urban-style close combat with jungle survival skills. Another remarkable aspect was the adaptation to tropical conditions. Soldiers faced extreme heat, humidity, disease, and wildlife, all of which compounded the difficulties of combat. Malaria, dysentery, fungal infections, and heat stroke were common and sometimes deadlier than enemy fire. Troops were trained in hygiene, rationing, and disease prevention, but the environment remained relentless. Clothing, equipment, and medical protocols were continually adjusted to account for these conditions, leading to innovations in uniform design, field medicine, and nutrition. Such adaptations highlight the often overlooked complexity of sustaining a military force in one of the harshest natural environments on Earth. The campaign also featured significant psychological and morale factors. Both Allied and Japanese forces understood the importance of perception, propaganda, and psychological resilience. Japanese troops often engaged in banzai charges or used extreme indoctrination to maintain morale, while Allied forces employed rotations, letters from home, and brief periods of rest to preserve effectiveness. Soldiers developed coping mechanisms, including camaraderie, humor, religious practices, and small rituals that allowed them to navigate the mental strain of constant danger. These human factors played a crucial role in determining the effectiveness of units under prolonged stress. One of the more fascinating historical details involves civilians caught in the conflict. On islands like Saipan, thousands of residents were trapped between combatants, facing coercion, starvation, and danger. Some were forcibly conscripted into labor or used to support Japanese positions, while others attempted daring escapes to Allied lines. Their experiences underscore the wider impact of the Pacific Campaign beyond the soldiers' immediate struggle, highlighting the war's reach into the lives of non-combatants and the moral complexities it created. Civilian actions often directly influence the course of operations, whether by guiding troops, reporting enemy positions, or surviving in isolation until hostilities ended. Logistics, often overshadowed by tales of heroism and combat, were a cornerstone of the campaign's success. Supplying thousands of troops across vast stretches of ocean required meticulous planning. Ships transported food, ammunition, medical supplies, and reinforcements, often under threat of submarine attack or air raids. Engineers built docks, piers, and makeshift harbors to facilitate unloading, while specialized landing craft ensured troops and equipment reached shore despite treacherous reefs and surf. These operations demanded coordination across multiple branches of the military, emphasizing that victory in the Pacific relied as much on organization as on valor. The campaign also accelerated technological innovation, some of which would have lasting impacts beyond the war. Advanced communications equipment, portable radios, and signal encryption improved coordination between units. Weapons design evolved to meet the demands of close quarters and jungle combat, leading to the development of more reliable rifles, flamethrowers, and demolition devices. Naval and aviation technology saw significant advancements, from improved radar and fire control to carrier-based aircraft capable of extended-range operations. These innovations were born out of necessity, driven by the unique challenges of island warfare, and they influenced military development well into the post-war era. Interestingly, the Pacific Island Campaign left an enduring environmental and cultural impact. Many islands were transformed by combat, with coral reefs damaged, forests burned, and local infrastructure destroyed. Archaeological and historical studies have since revealed remnants of bunkers, tunnels, and fortifications hidden in jungles and volcanic rock. Cultural artifacts, including temples, shrines, and civilian structures, were either destroyed or repurposed during the fighting. In the years following the war, efforts were made to preserve historical sites, document survivor accounts, and honor the sacrifices of both soldiers and civilians. These efforts highlight the campaign's enduring historical and cultural significance, ensuring that the lessons and memories of the Pacific battles remain accessible for future generations. Finally, the campaign demonstrated the extraordinary human adaptability and endurance in extreme conditions. Soldiers endured weeks of combat without rest, facing enemy fire, disease, and environmental hazards simultaneously. Civilians navigated survival under bombardment and occupation. Medics worked tirelessly under fire to save lives. Commanders balanced strategy, logistics, and morale with precision. The combination of courage, ingenuity, and persistence enabled the Allies to achieve strategic objectives, despite the staggering cost in lives and material. These details, often overshadowed by larger narratives, reveal the intricate tapestry of factors that define the Pacific Island Campaign: tactical innovation, logistical brilliance, environmental adaptation, and the profound resilience of the human spirit. In sum, the additional historical details of the Pacific Island Campaign illuminate the extraordinary complexity and significance of this theater of war. Beyond maps, battle plans, and casualty lists, the campaign was defined by innovation, adaptation, human endurance, and the ability to confront challenges that few could have imagined. From amphibious assaults to jungle survival, from tunnel warfare to logistical mastery, the Pacific Island Campaign stands as a testament not only to military strategy but to the resilience, courage, and ingenuity of the men and women who endured it. It remains a rich field of study for historians, military strategists, and anyone seeking to understand the full scope of World War II in the Pacific.